We're going to be reacting to Shadowlands killed Warcraft, so Blizzard's retconned by Bellular. Because, you know, the jailer truly did fuck up the lore beyond measure. It was truly a travesty of the highest order. So now that we're actually diving in, we can finally see what this retcon is and if it's actually a real retcon. But let's just dive into it and see what's being said.
Sponsored by Squarespace. Shadowlands happened. I'm sorry to remind you it did, but it did. And for many of us, it broke Warcraft's lore.
It did more than just break Warcraft's lore. It destroyed so many things. It broke the game, it broke the community, it broke everything. Shadowlands truly and absolutely fucked the game up beyond measure in such a harsh and brutal manner that I don't think people realize just how truly bad it was for the game. And just the lore is one part of it. A lot of people don't care about the lore, but it broke Warcraft as a franchise. It was like this big final nail in the coffin.
And we've talked about its failures to death. There's no denying that Shadowlands happened, that it's canon, but Blizzard are actually trying to fix that. But how do you deal with a problem like Shadowlands? Do you just ignore it? Do you quietly forget about it? Well, that's one option.
They need to say, I don't know what actually happened here, but in my opinion, what they need to say is, it was never real. It was the old gods playing tricks on us, and Shadowlands never actually happened. It was all N'Zoth and like the corruption and the darkness the whole time. We never killed N'Zoth at the end of BFA. We went to N'Zoth's dream realm, and that's what that was. So Shadowlands never happened.
But here's another approach: to take the bits that did work, and then to run with it. And also to, in a book, retcon some of the most disastrous things. And that's what we're seeing in the game right now. Because patch 11.2 has brought back some of the best, it's quietly forgotten the worst, and when we picked up Chronicle Volume 4 and did a little bit of reading, we've even seen a few things be retconned. But going in-game, we see Venari is back. She's seamlessly picked up from where she left off. It's pretty slick. The brokers have been given an origin that disconnects them from the Shadowlands and reconnects them to the actual game world that we do care about. And then some of the deeper mysteries, like Anima, Devourers, and the first ones, well, they have been reintroduced in a way that does not break the lore, because some of those things are no longer what we thought they were, Jerk.
And that's the best thing, because Shadowlands was absolutely a fucking travesty. It's like the collective hallucination. Gideon is the best solution. Like, N'Zoth released the toxin gases into Azeroth and everybody had a fucking terrible fever dream. And that's that, because it was such a terrible retconning of the world, of the situation, of just everything about World of Warcraft, that the only way to de-Shadowlands the lore is to act like that shit never happened at all. And Wild Jump, thank you for the follow-up, Cult, I appreciate that.
Shadowlands, and I mean that in a good way. So, the question today is simple. Are Blizzard saving the Shadowlands lore? Or, should I say, saving World of Warcraft from the Shadowlands lore? Whenever people send me things, first impressions count. And that's where today's sponsor, Squarespace, can let you make that strong first impression.
Gotta let Bellular get his Squarespace add-in. So I'm gonna put the volume on the lowest possible. If you guys want Squarespace, get Bellular's Squarespace link. It'll be in the description down below, the link to his video, and then you can click the Squarespace link in his video. But like, the Shadowlands truly broke World of Warcraft in such a way that a lot of people will never give retail another chance. Retail, as good as it is now, in the War Within Season 3, for example, is always going to be this foreign, alien concept to a lot of people that quit World of Warcraft, or a lot of classic players, because all they remember, all they think about when they think about retail is Shadowlands. How fucked the world, how it DEI'd this, or woke this, or whatever. And they completely and absolutely hate what World of Warcraft has become, and they'll never give it a chance because it's so ingrained in their mind that the Shadowlandsification of World of Warcraft is still there. They don't see the game changing and improving. They're stuck on the mindset that Shadowlands is the end-all be-all of Warcraft storytelling, and this is retail WoW, this is it forever. And that's something that truly needs to change.
Ready to send it live, my code, Bellular Gaming, gets you 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. We just watched Venari rock up to Soulscribe. She had the essence of Koresh in her hand, a literal part of her planet's world soul. And it looked quite familiar. It looked like something that we would see in Zereth Mortis. Sorry to trigger you, just maybe a bit more purple. But that got me thinking. Venari's back. Devourers are in play again alongside the brokers. But how far are they going to take it? Are they still saying that world souls are connected to the First Ones, whatever the First Ones may be? Of course, the First Ones being that piece of Shadowlands lore so controversial that it made us question everything we thought we knew about the setting. In a bad
in a bad way. It wasn't even a good way. The discovery that the first ones, the old ones, or whatever, were like the pre-Titan, all this random gibberish, and the jailer was the this and the that, and like it was so piss poor storytelling. It was like the worst fanfic you could think of. It was like going on Wattpad and having World of Warcraft's future being written by like a 13-year-old Wattpad girly.
way. And if you aren't sure what a Shadowlands era First One was, well, we never met them, but basically they were kind of like the Pantheon god people that came before all the other god people that we've known. To people, it wasn't that satisfying. Now, you could say it's a little bit like, say, you got the first generation of Greek deities, and then the second generation of Greek deities, but it just didn't work in World of Warcraft. Then I went a little bit deep, and that's when I realized something. The first ones have been quietly retconned, yes, and the jailer's final warning has been gutted. And the upshot of this is so much of the overcomplicated cosmic stuff has been brought down to ground, where it's finally understandable. And that's when I realized that they are basically saving what they can from the Shadowlands in a way that's positive for the health of the game. But let's set the scene. For anyone who may not know why Shadowlands is so very controversial, I'll put a fine point on it. Better still, I'll let Blizzard do it for me. Check out this panel from GDC 2023. First problem, the afterlife setting wasn't accessible. Second problem, the new antagonist wasn't developed.
To be fair, it's the singular best solution. There's no real fast and easy way to unretcon and unfuck up the story in the way that Retail WoW did. Just the removal of everything. It's not ideal, but it's better than it's better than the alternatives. The afterlife, the jailer, the antagonist, the bigger, better, cooler gods, supposedly, which weren't bigger, better, cooler than the Titans. The making everything that was so vast and cosmic seem linear and human, that seemed approachable or reachable, fuck the story up. And, I mean, Balilar's got a point here.
That new antagonist was the jailer. Finally, well-known story heroes were diminished. Looking at you, Arthas, Garrosh, Ner'zhul, Kel'Thuzad, and many more. So, as of 2023, we see that Blizzard are aware. But like I said, they obviously can't just ignore it, especially when things happened to characters, like say Anduin, that simply cannot be undone. Let's see how they've actually pulled this off. We've only been back to the Shadowlands a few times since that horrible expansion ended. In the Blood Elf Heritage chain, we went to Maldraxxus and Bastion. Why? Well, it was to find ways of making sure that Scourged souls stayed dead. And it's really all light touch stuff. We kind of go to the Shadowlands, but not really that much, and the bad bits of the Shadowlands aren't really dealt with. But then, of course, Anduin came back, and we knew it was coming. But here's the problem. He was still fundamentally, totally traumatized by a Shadowlands arc. It's hard to ignore that, and for a character like him, it's kind of right to be traumatized by that. Seriously, it was pretty damn horrible. The Calling short story.
He's still been MIA since the start of the War Within. I think he's coming back for Midnight WoW, but like, where has he been? Because he hasn't had much of anything to do with the War Within.
Then comes in and does a great job of showing his journey toward healing those wounds. Then we joined him in Khazalgar, where Faerun reintroduced him to the light. It's obviously been a while since then. At last we heard he was well on his way to rehabilitation. That will mean we will have a post-Shadowlands fixed up Anduin. But it's not enough to rehab Anduin. Blizzard also had to rehab the overall Warcraft setting. And that brings us to the world of Koresh, the homeworld of the Ethereals, introduced into the game with the Burning Crusade, but it's also now where the brokers have came from. Now, we long speculated that the brokers and Ethereals shared a connection. It was quite obvious visually. They both had cartels, they were traders, kind of looked similar. Now we know that they were another group of Koreshi who escaped their planet's destruction. Essentially, some fled into the Twisting Nether, they would be the Ethereals we met in TBC. Others crafted containment suits and fled into the Shadowlands. And that's why Tazavesh was in between the realms of the Shadowlands. Basically, they were refugees hiding out in the cracks of reality. Tazavesh itself, well, it's been revealed as one of the city-states that existed on Koresh, where it was ruled by this guy, Bilal, a name that may be familiar to the mages and priests listening because he was in your artifact quests back in Legion. Now, you can see how they're weaving the bits of Shadowlands that work.
That's honestly the best way to do it, because Shadowlands did have mild portions of it that were actually decent. Like what they did to Arthur's, Garrosh, and everybody else, like 25 fucking anima, really? They really fucked up a lot of characters and story beats, but it wasn't like the most terrible thing. It was terrible. It was absolutely the most terrible thing. But there were certain little elements that weren't that terrible. And the fact that they're going, yeah, Shadowlands happened, but collective amnesia, you don't remember what happened, and we record 90% of what happened in Shadowlands because it's irrelevant. None of this is real. Don't think about it. Oh my god, cool zones, Castle Nathria, ignore everything else. I kind of wish they would just come out and say, Shadowlands was a fever dream. Never happened. Shadowlands was a complete and absolute fever dream. Y'all never went there. Anduin's traumatized for a reason. And it is what it is. Let's go next. Let's just move on. It never happened.
Into the long-established lore, and doing that with characters we're familiar with. It's a satisfying reintroduction for the brokers, but the pinnacle of it is, of course, the one character that we can all agree rocked during Shadowlands, and that is Venari. The Maw was supposed to be the most brutal place in reality, one inspired by Dark Souls, and heading there, hiding in a cave, we found Venari. We traded her mountains of Stygia, and in return she taught us her rules of survival. She seemed a bit paranoid, a bit unhinged. Then, much later in Zereth Mortis, she found a way to escape the Shadowlands, and she even faked her own death. Strange enough end to a quirky character. But
the Maw had the potential to be cool. The Maw was like one of the worst dailies you could do. I quit, I think, Season 1 or Season 2 of Shadowlands, and I didn't play Dragonflight. I tried the War Within's launch for like 2 weeks, and I quit again. I am only finally getting into retail WoW now. After, holy shit, like the War Within Season 3. My first real return to retail WoW took almost 4.5, 5 years, give or take, for me to truly return to World of Warcraft. And that's the damage it's done. For so many people, the irreparable lore damage is devastating. Like, I am back in retail now because retail now looks good and feels good and is heading toward the direction I'm actually interested in. I assume over the coming few years, between Midnight WoW and the Last Titan, more and more people are going to return to World of Warcraft, to retail specifically. I'm just kind of curious how much of Shadowlands is going to get fully and absolutely retconned, or how much is going to be saved and like repurposed and rewritten. We'll find out pretty soon, I guess.
What was she actually doing there? Well, we can now look at the results. She returned to Koresh, and she used the massive wealth that she had gathered, partially via us, to set up the ecodomes. The ultimate one being Aldani. And at the end of that process, well, she brought her world back to life. And when that happens, she explains that the Maw was the closest thing to Koresh that she could find in the universe, and
what if they don't do Classic Puzzle after the Last Titan? That's an absolute possibility. I could 100% see that happening. I do think Classic Puzzle is coming, but if it's after the Last Titan, that would be a 2028 release, give or take, almost a 2029 release. And that would be kind of shitty, but not terrible. It really depends on how they announce it and how they showcase it for the most part. And no, retail is not as bad as Shadowlands. The War Within has some finicky, goofy moments. It's got some weird, quirky lore situations, but across the board, it's actually decent. Across the board, retail WoW is now better. I know for a lot of classic players that might be hard to believe, but Season 3 of The War Within is actually really good.
if she could understand it, she could save her world. I don't really know what she means, but whatever, it basically works. I'm willing to let that slide. Shadowlands didn't explain Venari's motivations, though. She was just there as a mystery. In fact, the brokers were just these hyper-mysterious dudes who liked to trade. We knew they gathered knowledge, wealth, and technology, but we did not know why. Seems like a fundamental flaw of that expansion storytelling. But now it's clear they were working towards one day going home. back to Koresh. And with how Blizzard have handled it, it's natural, it's smooth, they haven't needed to be smashed back into the lore. It feels natural. Now, Venari is still scheming and sarcastic. She still plays her cards close to her chest. But we now know she was trying to save what was left of Koresh. So it's an evolution of the Shadowlands lore that fits. Now, she references the past. She calls us Mawwalker, savior of Koresh after we downed Demencius, so she remembers. We remember, and you know what? It doesn't suck. A lot of other bits of Shadowlands did, but these bits basically didn't. Narratively anyway, I don't think anyone really enjoyed them all. But she's not the only thing back from the Shadowlands. We also see the Devourers, and they are now at the bottom of the food chain. It's no coincidence that we fight Demencius.
I mean, there are little things that have been returned from the Shadowlands. I don't think these little nods and teasers are the right play. I think the best play, and the singular best play, is just to say it never happened. Just literally say it didn't happen. I get why they're doing it like this. They want to have some continuity and make it feel smoother and better, but just say it never happened. Just, like, wash your hands of the whole situation.
The all-devouring in a patch where the Devourers from Shadowlands show up. Something important is happening here. Check out this text on this patch 11.2 mount. When one cosmically invasive threat meets another, sometimes the smaller ends up on the menu of the larger, which really does put the Devourers in their place, because once upon a time, they were the first hints at a massive cosmic conflict, one that has been quietly retconned out of the lore, and that is what is to come. Something that basically turned into a bit of a meme in the community. Because as the jailer died, that is what he warned us about. You know, a cosmos divided cannot stand against what is to come. That was the beginning of an arc under the game.
What is to come? Not most of the fucking player base, I'll tell you that much. Now, okay, I'm not saying that. No, I am saying, yeah. The Jailer literally was written in one expansion. If the Jailer had 5-6 expansions to build up his arc and character, I feel like people would have loved this character and his arc. They would have loved, like, the Jailer little nods back towards, like, you know, the Wrath of the Lich King and, like, Warcraft 3. If they had written it better, if BFA had started and then we saw a bunch of teasers of the Jailer, then instead of Shadowlands, we had Dragonflight with more teasers of the Jailer, and then the War Within with more and more teasers of the Jailer, and, like, you know, after the World Soul Saga, we then finally learn about the Jailer after like 5 years of this build up towards him. It would have been an amazing experience. But as it stands right now, all we got was the Jailer just being like, yo, it's me, I did everything, I wrote everything, I am everything, I am the Jailer. I am he who was him. And like, no, it was just piss poor writing.
Then, a creative director that it seems will never see the light of day. And that was an arc that it's the beginning of an arc under the game's then creative director
who is no longer working there.
Seems will never see the light of day. And that was an arc that basically was zooming out in the cosmos. But of course, in doing that, it meant that it was kind of saying that the things that we had cared about, that we actually liked about the Warcraft setting, were no longer nearly as important in the Warcraft setting, meaning that it just diluted the Warcraft setting. A lot of work has actually been done in the background, because now Blizzard are landing the most controversial aspects of the Shadowlands lore. They're fixing it. Remember this guy, Fareem? He was mad. He's the one who kept telling us that we were idiots for not understanding his First One's lore. Well, turns out he was the idiot the entire time, because that stuff has just been dropped. In Chronicle Volume 4, we get some key insights. Remember, Chronicle Volume 4 came out last year, so firmly not in that sordid era of Warcraft writing. One of the things in Chronicle 4 that has changed.
The Chronicle books kind of pissed me off as well, because 1 through 3 had a bunch of retcons of the previous lore that people did like. I know they're trying to streamline 20 years of fucking, or 30 years of writing into like one continuous explanation. And like Chronicles 1 to 3 did have a lot of amazing points, but like some of the lore was so shittily written that Chronicles could only do so much to patch up the lore. So I'm curious what Chronicles 4 actually did.
Or recontextualized, is the Jailer's warning. He said we wouldn't be able to fend off what is to come, but he never really told us what he thought was to come. And now, as it turns out, he did not know what was to come. It's quite interesting. Chronicle explains something here. While Zoval was the arbiter of the Shadowlands, so before he got trapped in the Maw and was a big bad guy, he glimpsed into countless mortal souls, and he kinda just felt that something bad was coming. No name, no definition, just bad vibes. So yeah, bad vibes were to come. Now he tried to tell the other Eternal Ones about all these bad vibes, but they basically said, it's probably all part of the First One's plan. Don't worry about it. Zovaal then, kicked off all of his jailer stuff. He had a big old civil war in the afterlife, and then he was trapped in the Maw until we turned up. Now, it makes his motivations as a villain worse, but it does stop the setting from being held back by some random cosmic threat, which is good. But you just heard me say the First Ones, and that's the big thing. The First Ones. The Titans of the Titans,
So the Zovaal and the other guys are no longer the First Ones. Zavaal's threat is no longer relevant at all to the story. Zavaal's threat is now just Zovaal looking... This man literally woke up from a bad dream and got mad at the cosmos. They turned him into, like, a girlfriend who got mad because you cheated on her in her own dream. This man fucked the lore over beyond recovery because my man woke up from a bad dream and put it on all of us. Like, goddamn. But let's see what it has to say about the new First Ones, because no longer are the old First Ones the First One. They're now the new ones. So the First Ones still come before the new ones, so...
guys who built the universe. I mean, even looking at stuff that was First One's architecture, it clearly appeared to be in the same lineage as that of the Titans. Well, here's where Chronicle does a slight change that's big. Instead of the First Ones being the gods of the gods, now, canonically, the First Ones are just a myth. They are just a myth that people in the Shadowlands believe. Something that they think is true, but that may not necessarily be true. And that pokes holes in the foundations of the Shadowlands lore. And it does so in a way that means we can just kind of forget that they existed. We can chalk it up to a weird myth that people in the afterlife...
So Chris Metzen came back and then effectively retconned 90% of the News's lore. Effectively, everything Shadowlands and BFA is getting retconned and retconned and retconned more and more and more, to the point of almost hilarity, because Chris Metzen just tried to look at how he could salvage this shit and just decided, well, can't salvage it. Time to act like everything that happened was kind of a joke. Haha, didn't mean it. Let's see what happens. Damn, Shadowlands is now just a backdrop of a backdrop. It's no longer relevant to anything.
Believe about how stuff works. Now, you could probably rationalize this. You could maybe say, well, perhaps it is the Titans who actually went and did something in the Shadowlands and then went off and did something else. And to the beings of the Shadowlands, those Titans are called the First Ones, and they never understood the difference. Or something like that. Could be the case. But basically, all of that huge, suffocating lore has been cut. And that leaves the future wide open.
So Chris Metzen came back, saw what they had done to his story, retconned the retcons of his retcons. So wait. Chris left, so they started to retcon Chris's lore. Then Chris came back and retconned the new lore, which retconned his lore. So now we are in the post-retcon of a retcon of a retcon, and the future can be fucking anything.
Okay, so we got retcons, recontextualizations, and reintroductions. It's clear the Blizzard are doing some heavy goddamn lifting to rehabilitate the Shadowlands, but that's actually not the end. Looking to the future, there's a big opportunity to do the same thing for other characters. Sargeras is back in The Last Titan. Almost certainly, right? But here's the thing with Sargeras. It was almost certainly a character from the Shadowlands who engineered Sargeras' downfall in the first place. That character is Sire Denathrius, the sire of the Dreadlords. The Dreadlords being the group who basically psyoped Sargeras into turning into, well, Sargeras.
Okay, interesting. So the Last Titan does denote the Last Titan, right? We know that effectively means between Azeroth and Sargeras, there's only one survivor, the Last Titan. So when Sargeras comes back in the Last Titan, it means Illidan is back. I assume it means we're going to probably get Arthas back and maybe even Garrosh back, because they've been doing a lot of retcons. I assume they're gonna do the alternate timelines. I think they're gonna like combine the timelines and do like a huge reset of the universe. I think there's gonna be like an open timeline to like the timeline where Garrosh was the great war chief of the Azeroth, where the Empire of Lordaeron and the like Emperor Arthas and all these different timelines are gonna come together, and we're all gonna fight against like setting the timeline straight or some kind of weird divergence.
Bad guy that we know. Of course, Sire Denathrius escaped justice in the end, and he has been sulking about with his Nathrezim ever since. So, if we're going to see a change in Sargeras, we'll have to get to the bottom of why he went over the edge, and that would be a perfect time to reintroduce Denathrius and make him face some consequences. Nothing here is set in stone, but it does illustrate how we can't just ignore the Shadowlands lore, because unfortunately, it did actually happen, and this isn't like in, say, comic books where we can just go and do a full reboot. Hard to do that in a big live game. So instead, Blizzard have got surgical. They're willing to do the work to reintroduce the bits that were good and to fix the stuff that essentially broke the lore. And that means we'll never see a return of its biggest themes or perhaps its mysteries. Don't expect the Primus to pop out in The Last Titan to slap some sense into Aman'Thul. No, that won't happen. But do expect to see little bits from the Shadowlands, but done in a way that makes sense. So, with that said, tell me what you think down below. I'm sure.
In my opinion, it's kind of like a patchy measure. It kind of feels like they're just dragging out the Shadowlands and like the lore and fixing it as much as they can. I feel like the Last Titan is a soft reset of the universe. I think, honestly, this has kind of been my theory, is we might not be getting a Classic Plus. We might be getting a WoW 2.0 where they go back to vanilla. Vanilla completely redone. Like from the ground up, a fully redesigned vanilla World of Warcraft. Like a WoW 2.0, where we go back to Azeroth, the stakes are lowered, we start from the beginning, you know. And I kind of feel like that's the direction they're going, because they literally need to reset the story. And I feel like they're going to reset the timeline. I feel like Azeroth's going to wake up and Azeroth's going to send us back to, like, you know, she's going to redo the timeline. She's going to be like, with my power as the Last Titan, the architect of the universe, the power of Sargeras and the First Ones, I'm going to set everything straight and return you, all of you, my champions, back to the beginning. And then it's going to go zoom. And it's going to be the vanilla trailer all over again, but way higher definition.
Sure that this is something we'll be debating for quite a long time indeed. And while a lot of this stuff has been fixed up pretty quickly, yeah, Koresh has been a little bit of a hard left turn, especially for some of the people who expected the War Within to more fully deal with Beledar, to fully go within the planet and deal with the World Soul. But of course now it's clear that that is something set up for the World Soul saga instead, which probably will be better for the overall story. And if this has whetted your appetite, well, check out this breakdown of Koresh's deepest lore next. I think you'll get a big kick out of it, and it'll help you understand and enjoy a lot of 11.2 more.
Another good Balilov video. There'll be a link in the description to his video, so you guys can go check it out there. If you haven't subscribed to Balilov yet, it's kind of surprising. Dude's pretty much the biggest WoW creator, not counting Asmon, who no longer makes WoW content. I will say, killing Shadowlands and retconning the whole thing is probably the singular best decision they could have ever made for retail. Like, I could not tell you all a better decision to make than retconning retail and acting like it never happened. For example, making sure that, well, in this context, making sure that the fucking Shadowlands is a completely fake, non-existent thing. So I'm honestly pretty excited about the future. I'm curious what they're going to do with Midnight WoW. It does seem like they're getting grittier and more like in-depth with the storytelling, but we'll have to wait and see. But hey, thank you all for watching. This is a second channel video. If you like, subscribe. If you don't, it's what it is. It's my second channel. Peace, everybody.